So when this page is on your reading that, or when this page is on your reading that.
I'm reading that. From that bill.
So
It does have, so that's on the independent page. And then I can
So this page relates to.
Could you come to the front, Chris? So, hello and welcome everyone. The actual meetup's going to start in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but before we do that, I'll just introduce the people. So, I'm not sure. Is Chris in shot? Look like you might need to look on the telephone. Yeah. I think he will be.
Should be now.
You should be now, yeah, for sure. Okay, so.
Sorry, there's a big lag. Yes.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is. That's so that you can kill it if something bad happens in the actual way. Anyway, so I'm Peter from Pegasus, and so Richard, tell us, quickly introduce yourself and tell people who are watching the live feed or watching the video recording thereafter.
Okay, so I'm Richard McEwen. I'm a chartered accountant, run a FinTech company called Integrated Capital, and we are using blockchain in our current applications, and I'm here today to talk to you about it.
Sounds fantastic. Alright, Frederick, you're next up.
I'm Frederick, and I have my co-founder Bryce here with me today. We'll be presenting about Token Spin and Tokens for Humanity. We've co-founded them to enable cryptocurrency philanthropy.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Alright.
My name's Chris Randall. I'm a systems architect with Consensus. With the solutions branch of that, we do, actually I'm going to cover that and I'll talk a little bit as well, but we do enterprise engagements. I'm going to talk today about a project we've done in the Philippines, the Project I2I, which connects up rural banks to the main banking networks using blockchain.
Okay, sounds fantastic. Alright, so everyone, just bear with it and maybe skip 10 minutes. Thanks. Live on YouTube. Oh, very good.
Live on YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube stuff.
Can we confirm, am I in that?
Yeah, don't worry. I'll zoom it in. So the good thing about videos is that if you zoom to adjust that, then you can see the colouring on the screen much better.
It's really great.
No?
Yeah. I think it was on the Consensus Facebook page.
And the password hasn't been. Can I know your password?
You can configure it to have a longer password by now.
Sorry?
You can configure it to have a longer.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Oh, cool. That's a cool t-shirt.
Security stop blocking.
Thank you.
Had to go through a complicated process to get there.
Yes. Yeah.
Required password? No, not that one. I lied. Just screensaver. That one. Or energy saver. For the two. So yeah, that one you don't want to turn the display off.
Yeah. Awesome.
And you probably want to check if you've got the screensaver on the lock as well. Desktop and screensaver, second from the top.
Nice.
Excuse me?
That's
How do you live stream this? Because a friend couldn't make it.
That Mevo camera just there,
Okay.
in conjunction with an app on your phone, goes.
That's the two
And so that little camera, you
Yeah.
can buy one of them for about $300.
No, I mean right now.
Oh.
Like, how do you see
Oh,
it?
if you want to see it right now, go onto YouTube,
YouTube.
and then look for Ethereum Engineering Group.
Right, just one moment.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming in today.
If you like, I'll put the link to it in the meetup.com thing for the event.
I beg your pardon.
I can put the link to the actual video in the meetup.com event for this. So if your friend can find the meetup.com event for today,
Yes.
then they'll be able to find the link to the video.
Yeah, when will you do that?
I can do it right now.
Oh, that'll be great, okay.
It's under the comment of the meetup page. It's under the comment of the meetup page. Do you have the email when you register?
No, there is one, yes.
Oh. Or maybe part applications of the board. You want me to put in applications of the board?
Alright, so it's there. Should be there right now. Start.
Is there a camera operator or?
Yeah. No. That's it.
Jogging places and stuff.
Kind of.
Kind of.
I'm independent.
Oh, and you're doing a presentation later?
Yeah, I have given one before here.
Oh, okay, good. I don't know, did you come last year last? Oh, well, I'm going to do this.
I'm not a It's good enough.
I had banana on the floor, so.
No, I'm starving.
That was my breakfast. Actually, my breakfast.
That's not good. Donuts for breakfast.
Oh, no, I had banana.
Oh, banana donuts are good.
No, just bananas. So how many trips do you normally have working in this environment?
Well, there are 23 seats, plus we've got meeting room and but most of us work from home a lot. And so it's only really one day a fortnight that we have a lot of heaps of people in here. But yeah, it's variable. But yeah, normally I think if you actually had a full 23 or 30 people, but you get all at once all the time, that would get very Yeah, 23 seats. Okay. And then if you, but then you can have people up there sleeping. I mean, our overall membership allows us to have 50 people, of which, they can just be outside. So, yeah, it is a very high density if you compare to like a normal, say, I don't know, big company or government.
Yeah, so if there's supposedly an occupational health and safety so many square meters per employee, rubbish. No one.
Well, look, I mean, this is still relatively.
That's right, that wasn't
No. We work, we've got this all over the place. All over the world. It's all like this. 28.
So you decided to get a bigger room this week?
Sorry?
You decided to get a bigger room this week after last?
Well, yeah, last week was big cakes from the thing is, instead of actually doing it in our office, can't handle it. I think some of us got pretty spacey last week, and were you there?
Fortnight ago.
Fortnight ago. There were an awful lot of people.
Did you cap this meeting?
No, I've decided just to see how many people show show off. Because 2/3 of people only come along anyway.
Well, in some cases, some of the other things we go to 40% is the,
60 odd, 50 or 60 at least.
yeah, if it rains, it's down to 40.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, you know.
Okay, 2 minutes to
Go
change.
to the short half one down at they capped it at 120 something and the room only holds 70 or 80 with the expectation that people would drop out. But the wait list was something like 30 and no one was dropping out. So it was just,
No.
Yeah.
No, that was rather popular.
yeah.
Well, and it's
That's
hard
very
trying to
good.
find spaces that you can hire every Wednesday lunchtime, you know, regularly, or not hire, because you want to, hopefully you want to have it for free.
Mm.
You know, because at the end of the day, we're not making any money out of this. You know, we're
Well, not directly.
education, not directly. Yeah, there's all sorts of flow on, but it's really just education. And
Well,
you
it's
know,
also education, reputation in the industry, building that. You've got the
exactly.
flow.
Yeah.
I support you.
All right, 12:30. Okay, so hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming along today. Today we're going to talk about application of blockchain, and we've got 3 speakers. We've got Richard, we've got Frederick, and we've got Chris, who are each going to work us through what they're using blockchain for. I know I've seen the slides already, and it's going to be awesome. So over to you, Chris. Richard, would like me to stand? If you are around about here, you will be in shot, but even if you're just off shot, so it's still all right.
Right, okay, got to be able to see what we've got here. Good afternoon everyone, and thanks for coming along to this meetup. So my name's Richard McEwen. I'm a chartered accountant by profession, and I run a FinTech company called Integrated Capital. So Integrated Capital has built a smart contract system that allows parties from anywhere in the world to transact trust in any currency across a wide variety of financial transactions. So we're trying to make smart money more agile. So our application is, it's a FinTech space that we're in, and in essence it's a FinTech as a service product that we've built, and that I'll go on and explain the components of. I'll just give you a little bit of history on Integrated Capital. So cast your mind back 10 years. The world was in the middle of the start of a global financial crisis. Banks didn't really know what they were doing, who they could transact with, could they trust the other party. Banks were falling over. Institutions themselves were really, you didn't know, even big institutions, the term too big to fail. And interestingly, I thought there's a reference in Satoshi, the first Genesis block of Bitcoin is a reference to the Financial Times on the 3rd of January 2009, saying the Chancellor is about to do a second bailout. So banks and institutions were failing, even in Australia locally. The banks needed government guarantees to even transact with each other. So there was certainly turmoil around. Now I'm assuming everyone was studying or weren't in school or primary school 10 years ago. And you do remember the GFC. So against this backdrop, I just started work at a family office in Brisbane, and the family office had substantial funds to invest. But our issue was that we needed to be careful who we were investing with and who to trust. So we actually approached Suncorp and said, look, you can't lend to some of your borrowers, can we potentially lend direct to them? Normally they'd say no, we've got a relationship, we don't want to give you anything. So surprisingly they said yes, and so we really started a peer-to-peer lending business out of the global financial crisis. So that was 10 years ago, and it progressed on a very rudimentary basis, dare I say, with spreadsheets and Word templates, Dropbox templates being statements being emailed around. So it was a pretty rudimentary system. But in that time, though, that it is a reasonable business. So we've run nearly 112 million in funding transactions. We've helped create 185 million in end product, which is real estate's been built out of it. About 630 assets, predominantly land, but some buildings. And currently we've got a lending portfolio of about 60 million. So now we're actually running that on our smart contract system. So that has evolved. Our systems have certainly evolved in that time. So that's really what I would like to talk to you about today. And I know Peter will distribute these slides, and I know you guys know more about a lot of this stuff than I do, so I'll skip through that one. But really the approach, or the way we're using Ethereum or blockchain technology in two particular ways. We will set up a private consortium blockchain for the parties to a particular financial transaction. We're running private Ethereum. It's running on our own infrastructure, which is run out of a data centre in Brisbane. And secondly, we've also built or created a public ERC20 token called ICAP, and that token is really to be used for platform fees on our platform, standardises payments. So that's it really in a nutshell. And I guess we're probably slightly different to other software developers in that, like, we're doing this for ourselves, and so we know what we want in our solution, and that solution works for us well. It's highly likely to work for other people, or we can customise it. So we're, perhaps we're building that from a different point of view. But our real problem was then not so much about getting business, because we had the funds and we had customers, but it was really allowing that system to scale up properly and to let the parties continue to trust each other, trust the system, and for it to be a system that they could use, and it was had all the transparency and things that they're used to in dealing with a small number of parties. So I suppose the answer to our question, the question of how we would scale up, became a bit out of left field a little bit. We also have a private cloud hosting business, mainly for accounting firms. It's come out of my contacts. So we host accounting firms, typically their Microsoft servers and Office licenses. We will host that for them out of infrastructure we have at NextDC. One of those firms got themselves crypto locked, and there was a ransom to be paid, which we didn't pay, we just restored back up, and the ransom, of course, they had to be paid in Bitcoin. So we restored the backup, and on we rolled. But at the back of my head, I thought, I've got to investigate what is this Bitcoin. So that was about 2015, late 15. I had no idea, but so I started Googling, and lo and behold, who knew there was so much interest in ledgers? I mean, I thought it was only accountants, but now suddenly there was this distributed ledger that all these parties were talking about, and so I essentially read further and came across the very fledgling Ethereum at that stage, and then I read about smart contracts, and I thought, wow, that really was a penny drop moment for me, because I thought this is a perfect system for us to run that peer-to-peer lending system that we're manually running now, and it'll be perfect. So we really set about looking to how we could set that system up and run it the way we wanted it to be run. So we sat down and we defined different concepts that we wanted to have in our system. This term Divisia really is just one particular distributed ledger technology that we're running in a particular environment. So I suppose that, and it's certainly running Ethereum in a private network now. But that doesn't mean we don't have to only have Ethereum. We could run other distributed ledgers in there. So we needed a mechanism to containerize different technologies at the distributed ledger level. So we called it a Divisio. It's also helpful in that we can again containerize users and uses by adding KYC or anti-money laundering requirements to get into particular Divisio. So it's really just our concept of containerization and staying across all technologies really. So parties, all of the smart contracts or the contracts and the paper contracts that our borrowers dealt with, there are various parties to them. This is a typical, down the bottom, I'm not sure how real easily that can be read, but so typically in our lending applications we'd have a solicitor group, we would have a lender group, we'd have a borrower group, engineer is a certifier for drawdowns. These are the parties that are defined in a legal contract, and so these parties needed to be elements of our smart contract system. So we've built that into our system. We are a platform administrator. We essentially are primarily responsible for consensus on that system. Now it's not like a big network like the public blockchain network. So we do know who's on the network. So but the platform administrator really essentially just needs to have enough resources to run the transaction to its duration and keep all of the users able to log into the system. Having said that, we don't need to be the platform administrator. We are at the moment, but the system, the smart contract system that we're building, is able to be used by other or licensed by other platform administrators if they so wish. Platform fees are really the license fee that we charge to run a transaction on our system. Platform fees are built into the paper contracts, and it's probably nothing more than a facilitation fee. We charge a facilitation fee to do a peer-to-peer loan. So the platform fee really standardises that and lets us bring that onto our platform. So it's a similar concept. We use that in our integrated private platform as well. All of our people that want Microsoft for a month, they pay a platform fee for a month, and that's what they get. They get their software running in that environment. So we also wanted a token in our system. So it is designed to be a stable token. It is not pegged to any particular currency, although it is approximately $1 Australian. It's interesting talking to ASIC about those requirements. They are very concerned that tokens are not derivatives or vice versa. So we're definitely, it's essentially a utility token, a frequent flyer style token to really reward good use on our platform. So there was certainly debate about whether we want that, and you definitely don't want the craziness of all the instability around tokens and cryptocurrencies. So that element is in our system. And then the last two components, so there's obviously smart contracts within our smart contract system, and an integrated capital is really just a type of smart contract. I suppose the innovation or the part that we have concentrated on is a system that allows a very quick mapping to go from a legally binding document that solicitors and borrowers and funders sign and agree to. So we just need to embed particular components into that document to make that much more readily transferable to our smart contract system. So it's not really, we're not replacing legal documents, it's really just an overlay that allows that a framework essentially to be across the local paper contract again and convert that into a smart contract. So again, the way we've developed that system, and particularly with on our peer-to-peer lending arrangement, we would initially hold transactions in an SQL database, a temporary SQL database within our infrastructure, and then the second step would be pushing that, or what we call baking that into a distributed ledger or the private Ethereum blockchain. So the time, that can vary depending on transaction, and it really depends on how quickly you want the transactions to be immutable, really. We've found that with our peer-to-peer lending that it's normally end of month plus 3 days. So the transactions will be baked into the blockchain at the end of that time. So all parties can see transactions and can agree to, and the authorities that need to be taken agree to the transaction. But we've adopted a 2-step process to do that. And probably which I think is the one of the most important layers is the end-to-end application layer, because this is really where the users of the system are going to interface with the system, and this is where their lives are going to be made better or worse for having used the system. So we really need it to be. We need the application layer to be something that they just can't live without. So we've built a private secured lending application. We've built capital funding. Those other end-to-end applications will be built and will sit on that framework that we've talked about, the division, their own smart contracts and the different parties. So we will develop that as we go along, but it's certainly up and running for the private lending and the capital funding. Again, I'm not sure how I'm going for time, but really the differences between the old way and the new way, we're lucky in that we are the user in this case, so we know what we want and we're building it into our systems, but really it just gives the user or the person with the funds, it gives them an enormous amount of control over those funds, even though it's still a transaction. They have total transparency on the transaction. They do approve transactions or they don't approve transactions. So it's a different process, and it's a much more agile system that we believe can be trusted more than paper contracts with intermediaries. You're really eliminating quite a few intermediaries in that. I know we're a platform administrator, but we don't have to be the administrator. So it's really a system that has a lot of advantages and will allow us to scale that business up. And I guess the other point to that is the fact that we've defined platform fees as being payable for the transaction. Those platform fees can be a zero transaction cost for, say, a lender. You can say, I'm not paying any transaction fees. The borrower can pay the entire thing. So in essence, you can have $0 transactions on our system, which, again, people that we're dealing with that have the money, they're generally very tight. So anything they can send off to someone else, they will. So similarly, the capital funding is very similar. It's really it's just a different level, a different type of lending in the same sort of transaction. So how does ICAP work? ICAP is the native token that we use on our platform to power the applications running on the system. It is an ERC20 token, and it's accessed through wallets on our system. It isn't on any exchanges at the moment, but it may well be. And really, it's just designed to make system, and that's what we're using that token for. It's a public Ethereum token, so that is, that's the way we've set that up. So just a few more points about ICAP. It's not a terribly complicated process, it's just conversion. All of our contracts are fiat-based contracts, and I would envisage that way for some time yet. So that token, so it tends to have a very stable Australian dollar tracking, which is really what we wanted. There's no volatility in it. So really, that's how we're using that. So the last couple of slides.
Pretty much out.
So these are just some screenshots of our phase 1 of our system. I know you can hardly read those, but phase 1 has concentrated on getting the parties onto the system, us as platform administrator, what functions we can do, getting the integrated contracts themselves, or what we call integrated contracts. That's a copy. I've redacted that because we are running that $60 million loan book. So they're live transactions on our integrated contracts. So we can then, each one of those is a contract with different parties. We can drill down into that, and we have, you can see what's happening and who's involved. You can see what current transactions are, what interest rate is automatically calculating and accruing interest in all those loans. There are other parameters in there, term rates. So that's a pretty powerful contract page that we use as an administrator. And we are really controlling access to that for only parties that want, or that are involved in a particular chain. It is evolving as we go along. So for example, as Peter mentioned earlier, our phase 1 we have completed, phase 2 we're doing now. In phase 2 we're definitely looking at incorporating Pantheon into phase 2 because of all the benefits that we'll get out of privacy around transactions, the private transactions. So really that will be changed by the time we get to the end of phase 2, but that documentation is there, and it really outlines the architecture that we have used today. So I guess watch this space in that regard. Phase 2 will be April, May, we hope. Certainly end of financial year we'll be out with that. So really those slides are available there. Pardon me for looking at my paper. But just so if we go right through to the end, so that's basically it. But look, my comments, my only closing comments would be, we're dealing with very conservative users. To talk about distributed ledger and cryptocurrency is actually a no-no. They don't need to know really that that's the technology that is part of this system. They've got a smart contract system that we're giving them, and the application layer that they deal with is fantastic. So that, certainly we talk about it, but it's peculiar in a way that there's a lot of negativity and still conservatism out there. So I basically avoid it when I talk about it. I don't make a song and dance about it. And the second thing is, I think you've got to let your system deal with technology as it evolves. As I say, we're looking at Pantheon, but you've got to have a system that's going to change with the times. And thirdly, I think the interesting thing dealing with our part is they're tiny little networks that we're dealing with, 3, 4 and 5 parties. I know everyone's focusing on the big networks, Ethereum and large distributed networks, but you do get an amazing array of benefits out of even a tiny little network. At 3 or more, you've got all sorts of internal controls built in there. You've got transparency around all that data. there are a lot of benefits that we're getting just out of a tiny little distributed network. So it doesn't have to be a big network. So really, we're just pushing on, trying to make smart money more agile. And so if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Yes, I'm an accountant, by the way, so accountants can, explain give you the details that you didn't know you were looking for. So yes, Owen.
My question is in relation to privacy.
Yes.
You as the network administrator, it looks like your customers are not synonymous to you, but you actually have visibility into their names and the details of their transactions. And I'm wondering if this has been an issue for you as you sell your solution.
Well, that's right, and hence we're looking at Pantheon. Essentially, we would set up a whole new division for a different party and run that as a totally separate network on our system. At this stage, though, it isn't an issue, but we're dealing with one particular lender with multiple borrowers. But yes, it is well aware of that as an issue. And
I'm just curious if there's been any concern on the customer side that they care that you're seeing their transactions.
No, in that we are heavily involved in the transaction. When we get to that next stage, yes, I would think totally, and that's why we're looking to say, well, someone else could be a platform administrator, or one of those parties. You could have your own accountant if you wanted to. They could be the platform administrator for a transaction, or a solicitor, or an auditor.
And would you see that enhanced privacy functionality as helping your sales cycle?
I believe so. Yeah, sure. We don't really want to be we don't want to be in every transaction. We are for now, because we're building this thing for us. But we would like to step out of that and the system be available for other parties, really. That's the plan. So, yeah.
So you said you had some small consortiums and so on. What happens if they stop playing, don't want to play with each other anymore?
Yes.
What's the aspects with regards to data retention policies and, say, decommissioning or that private blockchain? What do you plan to do with that?
Okay. Well, what we would do is we would revert to the legally binding, their contract, and we would see what happens with that. I guess in a typical sense, we would retain that, but disconnect access to it from them. It would stay there, and that hasn't happened, but and you've got to think they're really going to have to see the transaction through in a way, because it's someone's lent money, someone's borrowed money. There are consequences if you don't pay that back. This thing's just tracking.
Oh yeah, just at a small consortium in 3 to 5 years' time, they've finished all their business and there's no copy takeovers and they're not allowed to do that anymore or whatever.
Yes, we will archive that. We haven't got to that stage, but we will archive it. Not dissimilar to the last discussion.
Discussion we're having on archive.
We'll follow consensus on that.
Yeah, but we might need to wrap up this and move to the next speaker. But save the questions for after the meetup, please.
All right.
Hi everyone, I'm Frederick and this is Bryce, and we're the co-founders of Token Spin and Tokens for Humanity. So this is thanks. And this afternoon we're going to be talking about what Token Spin and Tokens for Humanity is.
Maybe one more slide.
Why we founded Token Spin and Tokens for Humanity, and then Bryce will conclude with a little bit of an insight as to some of the observations we've made while operating in the blockchain space. So Bryce and I are close friends. We're university educated. Bryce has a background in business and finance, and I myself am interested in organization operations and IT. So naturally in 2016, when there was a large push around DAO structures, it piqued our interest in cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. So from there we invested, naturally. We were speculating, we were investing, we were interested in the space, we were learning. And over time we found ourselves in a situation where we had all this cryptocurrency and we wanted to give back. So we wanted to give to charity and charitable causes and people who needed money. And there was a large rise in wealth in such a short period of time in such a new market that we weren't the only ones. We saw Band-Aid solutions like the Pineapple Fund, which was a fund set up by an early Bitcoin purchaser who was giving away around $16 million to charity. And the caveat was the charities had to go apply to this Pineapple Fund in the cryptocurrency space and have processes to be able to take that money in, exchange it, and use it. And bear in mind, not many charities have those processes down pat. So we looked around and saw the need, and we decided to create something of our own. And this was Tokens for Humanity. So Tokens for Humanity is a charity registered here in Australia by the ACNC with the purpose of assisting in the development of blockchain applications in the non-profit and charity sector to enable cryptocurrency philanthropy. And we are looking at ways in which we can move value from the cryptocurrency market to doing some good. We started thinking, what would be the best first application to build? Something that obviously charities are going to be the ones to enact this change, so it has to be familiar to charities, and it also preferably would be something already used by cryptocurrency holders. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, have another ICO, and make things too confusing for people in the space already. And we naturally were guided towards fundraising raffles. So fundraising raffles here in Australia are quite a big source of funding for charities, and their use of gaming is, not sure if many of you are familiar, but it's a highly used application of cryptocurrencies. So we started off our venture with, after creating our charity and thinking about what we're going to do, we started with Token Spin. Token Spin is a blockchain fundraising product that operates smart contract raffles for cryptocurrency holders to be able to purchase tickets. A portion of the proceeds go to the prize pool, and a portion of the ticket goes to automatically to the charity of their choosing. So to give you an example of how it operates, users will land on the Token Spin site, they'll navigate through the raffles, figure out which one they prefer, depending on the participants, how much the tickets are. They'll go to buy a ticket, they can buy a ticket, they can buy 10 tickets, they can choose which charity their proceeds are sent to, and that's it. MetaMask will pop up, or they can use their preferred cryptocurrency wallet to copy and paste the raffle smart contract administration address and send funds directly to it. So we've tried to break down the barriers for cryptocurrency holders as much as possible, make it really easy, seamless for them, and we've also tried to break down the barriers for entry for charities, because obviously charities are the ones that are going to be enacting this change, and now they're faced with a whole new market and a whole new way of fundraising. They're going to get a little bit confused. So through Tokens for Humanity, we help them with all the administrative processes. So funds come in, we'll exchange them for them. We set up the processes to securely hold, exchange, and remit the funds to the charities. And we've made things as easy as possible for them to start accepting cryptocurrencies, and they can start accepting these cryptocurrencies today. So we've set up some of the process for them to be able to do so. And one thing that we're currently working on now is enabling direct cryptocurrency donations from individuals and businesses holding cryptocurrencies. So these businesses, for example, can allocate a portion of their profits to the charity of their choosing, or their stakeholders choosing. That's in some sort of corporate social responsibility program. So the way that we see it is Tokens for Humanity acting as a gateway to cryptocurrency philanthropists. So We will obviously provide them with token spin already. It's a blockchain gaming product and a range of other fundraising products that will enable cryptocurrency philanthropy, whether it be gaming or outside of the gaming sphere, and also direct donations, which will obviously just allow cryptocurrency holders to donate directly to the charity of their choosing. And so I'll pass you over to Bryce, who's going to talk to you about our journey, what we've done today, where we've been and how we came to here, and provide you with the observations that we've made while operating in the space.
Cool, might just swap over so I can change the slides. But we've had a really interesting journey. We started off at the University of Queensland going through the iLab Accelerator program. And this was December of 2017. It went until March 2018. So we were there when a lot of the hype was around in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. We went through UQ Startup Academy, which was their first program, basically where participants would go through this 12-week program. You pitch at the end, and if you win, you get funding. And luckily we won, so we got some funding, which was great. More recently, we went through QUT's Blue Box, and that was a really good program for us. We're going through Impact Academy at the moment. I think one of the things here that has been beneficial for us is with a lot of the universities and their programs, it's kind of good to get that point of trust, because working in a space where it's very important that we have good reference points, and we've worked with a lot of universities and trusted institutions, so it's been a big help for us, and we've got a lot of support from the Brisbane community, which is great, and we got help from King & Wood Mallesons through a lot of the regulatory issues. But I guess what I'd like to take you through is kind of the practical insights from us operating and going through the space and seeing what it's like trying to work through a lot of the regulatory bodies. It's kind of interesting because we're operating in a space that is kind of very conservative. There's really not much leeway in the charity space or charitable fundraising. So when we started out, we got approval from the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission, which is what Fred was talking about. So they approved the charities here. We're the first charity to be registered. We told them we're upfront with them. We told them we're using blockchain, and that's how we power a lot of the stuff that we do. They approved us, which is great. We got approval from New South Wales Office of Fair Trading to fundraise there. We recently were in talks with OFT Queensland, and they've been great. They've been really helpful, but they have to work within the confines of what they have. And sometimes that can be quite difficult to try and navigate. It's a bit of a lengthy process, so it's delayed our launch quite a bit because we want to make sure that we have everything right before launching, and obviously not launching without licenses or anything. So it's a process that's taken us quite a while. And I guess it's kind of interesting because in the space there's these feedback loop between perception issues, and then there was initially that lack of government regulation, and then there was the perception issue, which was kind of counterbalanced by the fact that people were making money in the space and everybody was sold on the fact that it was the future. So in the beginning, the perception issues kind of helped us because everybody thought, oh yeah, blockchain, they help you along. And then now it's kind of like the biggest hurdle that we've had recently as a blockchain company is insurance, because a lot of the underwriters don't know how to price the risk, or they don't want to underwrite the risk, and so that's kind of tricky as a blockchain business. But there's been quite a lot of hurdles. We've recently got that one sorted out. But yeah, I guess it's been a really long journey for us to try and navigate a lot of the regulatory landscape, but we've opened it up for the people who are coming into the space to enable blockchain or cryptocurrency philanthropy. So by us being the first and trying to push through that and continue on with it, there will hopefully be many more projects coming into the space. We really believe the technology has a real impact in this sector, and it's one of the things that we're passionate about. And if you want to get in contact with us, emails are here. Thank you.
Questions? I'll just say, I think I remember you guys from Idea Hub and iLab, so it's great to see you progressing like this. Well done.
Thanks.
So how do you deal with the different fundraising rules in each state?
Yeah, it's very tricky.
To know your customer or some equivalent to.
Yeah, the state-based fundraising legislation has been difficult. They're actually reforming it right now, but we started at a time when it still is, it's quite separated. But the short answer is it's very, very difficult because every state has its own unique requirements. So operating in Queensland is nothing like operating in New South Wales. They're a bit similar, but the different states have very different rules around how to operate, so it's very difficult.
And your raffle, is that electronic rather than printing out tickets and pulling
Correct.
them out?
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So how often do you win a prize, or how long do you have, like, you accumulate a certain amount of money for the prize and then it runs? So it could be, depending on the amount of donations, 6 weeks time, and the next one might be 3 weeks or something like that. But
The timing's varied, so
Yeah,
people can come in. Really, so when 2 people are in the pool, the timer will start. So if one could be running for 10 minutes and one could be running for 6 months. So it can be really varied up to whatever the demand is for the time, really. So it's kind of time based rather than prize based. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah.
And what's interesting is there are a lot of levers to pull, so we can figure out what times people are interested in buying what tickets and how much is the best price to sell these tickets. We can alter the rate at which the raffles are run, the timing of the raffles, the maximum participants, minimum participants, and everything else. So it gives us a lot of flexibility actually, having our raffles operated with smart contracts.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks everyone.
Okay. I'm going to talk to you about a project that I've been heavily involved in for the past year. Kicked off January last year, actually. Lucas was the initial kickoff. So I'm with Consensus, and I'm part of Consensus Solutions. So Consensus is mainly a venture studio, creating all kinds of different sort of mini startups, but the solutions arm is going after enterprise and government contracts. And so this project here was with a large bank in the Philippines. Cool. So the Philippines is an archipelago. In Manila and in the city centres, it is very built up. Manila is actually the most populous city in the world, and you definitely notice that when you're there. But as you get out, the rural areas, and especially on the smaller islands, are very rural. There's not a whole lot of infrastructure there. In the rural areas, there's what's called rural banks, which is actually a classification of them. So there's enterprise banks at the very top, which is like our big four. You've got commercial banks, which are kind of a smaller thing, and then the rural banks, of which there's about 500, are maybe something like Bank of Queensland, probably not at that kind of level though, but they're serving small areas. The thing with the rural banks is they are not part of any of the main banking networks that exist even within the Philippines, let alone internationally. So the processes for even like doing a transaction, sending money to someone in another part of the Philippines is a very manual and very slow process. So that was the main problem, I guess. The business problem that's been addressed by this project is better domestic remittance, so a much more efficient ability for transacting within the country. The project's called I2I now, which stands for island to island, or institution to institution, individual to individual. And I think I've explained enough about that already. I'll pop into the fantastic little video that was put together when we did our first exploratory sort of work there in January last year. Oh, that's not the way to do that though.
Maybe if this were present mode. Oh yeah.
I just I hope you can hear.
Well, this partnership between Union Bank and between Consensus and Continent Bank, what we're all trying to solve is financial inclusion. So the question is, how do we get financially excluded Filipinos who are generally located in the rural countryside of the Philippines?
The idea started out with a possibility of connecting all these rural banks so that their customers could be financially.
There used to be 3,000 rural banks. They're now less than 500. The rural banks are such a critical piece of infrastructure in terms of being embedded in remote, small village communities. We don't want to lose the ability that the rural banks provide uniquely of being in the community, being invested in the community, and therefore being interested in the progress and development of that community.
I think the big thing about this project is that we're 110 million Filipinos, and about 70 million of them don't even have access to bank accounts. And not only that, but a lot of these Filipinos in the rural places do have access to bank accounts. They can't even transact overseas because your rural banks don't even have access to the SWIFT banking system or any other way to sort of transact overseas.
We're really going to go down deep into the problem and the opportunities that this bank space, and trying to understand how blockchain can help them overcome those pain points and capture those opportunities. So it's going to be very practical sessions where we really understand the problems and try to build new solutions based on blockchain for rural banks.
And our model, at least the FinTech group, is to work with as many and all FinTech as possible. That's really the way we want to do it. So Consensus, Union Bank, Untitled, it's a collaboration partnership to make this happen.
Part of that video really does bring to mind. We conducted a bunch of user interviews, but we met with a lot of the customers of the banks in Canterland. Was the rural bank that we kind of initially based everything with, and it was really interesting what the banks were such social hubs. People really loved going there and spending time there, which is different to the way that I think about banks. So look, the solution that we came up with then for this, it's really another payment rail. So it's a banking network that all of the rural banks can participate in. These are core components of it, and this is a pretty good summary, I think. Really, we've got an Ethereum chain. A private Ethereum chain, and we used Kaleido. Actually, I'll go into each of these in a bit more detail in the next slides, but there's a smart contract there, and then we also built an API so that the interactions were not actually directly like Ethereum wallet interactions. I guess probably the biggest thing there was so we could provide key management as well, so there's not the risk of a rural bank losing their keys and then losing access to their funds. So we provide this API layer in between, which has the authentication, and we hold an account for each of them. In addition to that, I've separated these. These are the parts that Consensus built, and these are the parts that Union Bank built. So the integration with their core banking system and the front end interface that the rural banks actually use. Kind of go into each of these parts a little bit, or each of the Consensus parts at least. So at its core, it is actually just an ERC20 token. It's a stable coin or an asset-backed token is terminology you often hear. So it's one-for-one backed with the Filipino peso. And the way it works is that these are the kind of the core actions there. A rural bank will pledge a certain amount of pesos, and they will receive then that same holding in these crypto pesos. And they need to do that through Union Bank. They're what we call the issuer. So it's centralized in that sense, but once they're holding those, the API platform means that they can transfer them around at will, and it's just using a normal ERC20 transfer. And at any time then, a holder of those tokens, one of the rural banks, can go back to Union Bank to redeem and receive the equivalent in fiat Filipino pesos. That's kind of the core of the system. The interface to it then is via this API that we built, and I think I mentioned, really kind of the biggest thing there is we provide this key management layer. So they've got accounts, and kind of a layer between this chain and your actual accounts. I'm going to give a little plug to Kaleido. So here, Kaleido is that's a consensus product, and it's allows you to very, very easily spin up private and consortium Ethereum. They have all core networks.
Chris, could you open that?
So that was fantastic to have that available. That I can't stress enough, having done it the old first principles kind of way. Kaleido makes it so easy to create a network. So the chain runs on Kaleido. It's a private chain, as I mentioned. We've got the ERC20 token. We've got the API layer. Core banking integration. I've probably spoken about this a little bit already. Every one of the rural banks also has a bank account with Union Bank, and that's where the pledge and redeem can move between effectively their crypto wallet or the crypto peso account and their fiat peso bank account. And we do as well the entry in the core banking system. A hash of that is put into the chain as kind of a proof of the actual movement of the money between the fiat and the crypto peso account. That's kind of it. I've got a bit of a backup video to go a bit longer, but I'm hoping that there's questions. That's fairly high level, so I can do. No, questions.
So systems wide, is it?
Great question. I'm glad that you asked that. No, but we're looking at really a go live date of within about a month, really. Yeah. So it kicked off January last year. All kinds of regulatory things to address with the central bank there. But yeah, we're looking at launching possibly next month.
Yeah, another question, if I may.
Please.
And so, are all is the entire chain held in country?
Okay, interesting one. Well, it's not, because Kaleido is a cloud hosted.
That's why I asked.
Yeah. So no, it's not. The chain is in Singapore. I think it's the region.
Right.
So it's AWS region.
AWS region.
Yeah, that's right.
And so you're finding that the banks have adequate network access to.
I see. So actually, the way that it works, the banks are, it's more centralized than that. The banks are actually going, like they've got, that has been a big issue. That was like a thing that absolutely needed to be addressed, was the network connectivity. So it's actually a web interface that they use to go through this thing, and they're actually just going direct to Union Bank for that, and Union Bank is passing on the transaction there. So, and that's relatively thin. So the amount of data between for the web interface to there. So, yeah.
And this is Union Bank in Manila, not Cebu.
Yes, I'm not sure the Cebu one.
Well, I think they got started there.
Oh, possibly.
That's
Okay.
why I asked.
Head office is in Manila. So
It's in Manila now.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I know everyone's desperate to leave, but I've seen that next video. It was awesome.
Do you want another video?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's only about a 3-minute video, so it's not much at all.
And so I've got various other links in the slides there if anyone
just very quickly
wants to know more, that will be shared.
When Solutions started, our objective was to build a competent entity that could interact globally across a lot of different verticals, certainly with focuses on banking. The I2I project is currently focused on the Philippines, a wonderful country. It's the most heterogeneous population in Asia that natively speaks English. There's 110 million people. 70% of them are without financial services. The current state of the banking infrastructure is not good enough to keep up with growth. And so solutions people on our side have a tremendous opportunity to accelerate the growth of an ecosystem. We can help educate their teams, working with large banks or even the central bank. We can provide assistance, both technical and business and otherwise. I2I went in and tried to understand the problem of rural banking. And basically we learned that it comes down to two key issues. One, it's very difficult and expensive for provincial areas to stand up and maintain IT infrastructure. And two, much of the transaction processing is done manually. It's a very slow and arduous process. So we thought, well, why not extend an open Ethereum network that's modular, that all of these rural banks can connect to. They can use Ethereum to ensure transactions have a high degree of integrity, and so we make the whole process much more efficient and less prone to errors. Consequently, it's very easy for rural banks to plug in, get connected, and now they have a settlement and clearing system that actually works.
To me, the main driver is that it fulfills our purpose as a banking institution, which is to elevate lives. The idea of coming together on the blockchain and be able to do transactions as a national franchise, I thought was a very exciting possibility to make a difference.
What we basically built is programmable money that is built on the Ethereum blockchain that bank-to-bank transfers between one rural bank to another. What we envision is as simple as providing these rural banks with an iPad and an application that they can log into, where now they can transact from one different island to another very seamlessly at near real time at very low cost. And how our team is accelerating that is through our advisory work, not only on the technological development side, but also on the regulatory side, and we're kind of paving the way to help inform those types of policies. The ways to consensus solutions approaches the problem, we always follow a very sustainable approach at first. Having been one of the very first blockchain consulting companies in the world has given us an advantage because we have been looking at it for much longer. We are working alongside the protocol developers of Ethereum that are informing the way we design a solution for our clients. Enterprise in particular,
oh. No one's going to be able to hear it. Maybe to the end slide. Yeah. Anyway, it was a good video. I'm sure you can Google it and find it online. If you click on the next slide button down there, yeah. All right. Yes. So we start. Thank you. So thank you everyone for. It's interesting to see how people are actually using the technology. You know, I mean, I know us in Panther, we're busy building the platform, but actually seeing people use it is great. And I think, you know, changing lives, doing things better, it's all great. So, next fortnight, Jason over there is going to tell us how to run Pantheon, how to stand up a node and how to operate it. And it's going to be as awesome as today. And we're going to have this bigger audience because everyone wants to know how to run Pantheon. Oh, actually, that has been finalized. So we're going to learn, so range proofs. So how do you prove that a value is in a certain range, like a positive number, without actually telling people what the number is? It's a complex little thing. So the idea there's a lot of technologies where you can, without telling people what the current value is and then the next value is, you can transfer an amount. But obviously, you know, you could say, I've got 5, I'm going to transfer 3, and your balance goes up by 3, my balance goes to 2. But how do you know that I don't transfer 6, and my balance goes to -1? there's, you know, obviously if I'm transferring money from a debit account, I shouldn't be able to do that. So range proofs is a technology which can prove that you can do that. So they're having an interesting talk on that on April 20, and sorry to Ken, who's person who's presenting there. On May the 1st, we've got people from UQQT and Griffith University who are going to come along and talk about their current research. And you, Dulette, is, and apologies because I may have mispronounced that, just going to give us, sorry? There you go. All right, they are going to give us it's a crypto-economic perspective on the Beef Ledger project. And anyway, we're in discussions about who else is going to talk. Okay, and then we're going to hear from Sally and Chris again. Chris is going to be a YouTube star. Yeah, he's going to tell us all about how to do Solidity code and develop an Ethereum application using Truffle, MetaMask Remix, and Stats in conjunction with Sally. And so, and we have a whole block of other ones as well, but that's the near-term future. So thank you everyone for coming along, and yeah, don't feel that you've got to zip off immediately. Please chat and everything, and so thanks.